Welcome back. And for our final session tonight, we will turn into the subject of Asian design to explore its history and legacy and see what it means for the creative thinkers and practitioners across Asia today.
I'm so excited about this topic because Asian design has such a rich history. I'm so looking forward to this discussion.
All right, so let's go ahead and get started.
Asian design has a long and illustrious history, but is so much more than Eastern aesthetics and the continent's cultural heritage. It encompasses an appreciation for site specificity and context-driven design and architecture. It has evolved over time in a continuous conversation with traditional creativity and innovation. The top creatives in Asia today draw on their rich heritage while staying immersed in the latest tech innovation and developments in users' experience. This makes the region the leading edge in design, offering a perspective that is in dialogue with the past while building the future. Today, our panel will discuss this vibrant scene and what is in store for the Asian design of tomorrow. William Lim is at the forefront of architecture, culture, and art globally in his role as the founder and managing director of CL3 Architects. Aside from his architectural achievements, William is also a celebrated artist who has been shown internationally. Stanley Wong Ping Pui is the founder and creative director of 84,000 Communications Limited in Hong Kong. Stanley is a renowned visual communicator, first gaining prominence with his Red, White, Blue series, representing the positive spirit of Hong Kong, which he presented at the 51st Venice Biennale in 2005. He established 84,000 Communication in 2007 and has since continued his illustration career. In 2020, he was named DFA World's Outstanding Chinese Designer. Leading the talk will be Sarah Mao. She is the director for Christine's Education in Asia Pacific, overseeing the development of programs and partnerships across Hong Kong, China, and Southeast Asia. Mao currently leads programs in Asian arts, art businesses, and luxury connoisseurship, with a focus on women's artists and art and tech.
Good evening and welcome to, I believe, which is the last panel discussion for today at BODW. I'm delighted to be the moderator for this evening, and by my side we have William and Stanley here. Great introduction to you both. Well, I know when we were prepping for today's session, I said I don't really need to be here because the both of you are such good friends and have worked together on so many projects before. William, an architect, designer, and in your kind of COVID days became also kind of a great artist. Stanley, yourself starting in advertising, and now kind of with your both Stanley and another mountain man combined is really kind of a visual artist and visual communicator. Right. So welcome both of you.
Thank you.
Before we begin with our conversation, I know that both of you being kind of talking about reimagining or speaking about Asian design, I think a lot of it has to do with the visuality of things and the aesthetics of things. And rather than having the three of us sit around and talk about it, I think a great way to kick off today's conversation would be to actually see some of the recent projects and some of the designs that both William and Stanley have been working on, not just in recent years, but over the last few decades. And in celebration of that, William has produced and put together East Meets East, a book that, thanks to his wonderful friend Stanley as well, the artistic director of the book, has combined and put this together. So before we go into the discussion, we'd love to take a little peek into William's artistic mind, his aesthetics, and share a short but wonderful video of William inside his art studio.
I'm William Lim. I'm the Managing Director of CL3 Architects, a Hong Kong-based design and architecture company. The book is kind of a commemoration of the 30 years anniversary of my company. And it's almost like over 40 years of my design journey through architecture, starting from the time that I was a student until now. Yeah, so I think this is a very good time for the book. I think it has a lot to do with our change in mentality after COVID. And I think in terms of design is changing, in terms of my approach and my philosophy towards design is also changing. This is the fish. So this is the fish lantern. This is one of the very important projects that kind of lead me to think very in a more Asian way about my design. And this is with bamboo construction, totally unique to Hong Kong. So that is definitely an important project. It's a very thick book with 400 pages. It's very pictorial. And as I flip through, you would see a lot of elements that has a very strong Asian identity to them. They could be very contemporary, but they do feel very Asian, and it does include some Asian art forms in them. When I look back at my projects, actually a lot of them are based in Asia, so they have a lot to do with the East. And since they were also contain ideas from the East, not necessarily kind of iconic elements like a dragon or things like that, but it's really more the philosophy, the essence of kind of a Chinese and Asian approach to design. For the past 40 years, we've been talking about East meets West. And I think at one point, it was also kind of my company philosophy that we are doing things that crosses the East-West culture. But then I think starting from maybe about 15, 20 years ago, we started to do more and more hotel projects. And we were dealing with international brands. But I think their requirement is that the project, since it's in Asia, should feel Asian, and it should, when you wake up in a place, you should know where you are. So this kind of like globalization of design start to take on a different turn. This was what I learned as a student, and then in between, architecture start to take on a very globalized view, and people were doing the same glass building in Alaska as they would in Miami. You know, pretty much it's glass buildings everywhere, and I think it start to lose the essence of the ethnicity and the locality of a project. And I think what I'm hoping to talk about is when we are designing for Asia, we should start to look at the Asian context. We should look at the density of the city, which is very different from anywhere else in the world. I think Asia faces a lot of very different kind of design constraints. So we no longer use the Western principle to design in Asia. We need to look at Asia and the Asian characteristics when we think about design in this region. If I go to Africa, I would definitely want to seek for, you know, things that were designed locally by the local people, local craftsmanship. I think it would become a more of a worldwide phenomenon that people are looking for the more human side of design, the more tactile, the more handcrafted, and then they would look for different culture being able to do different kinds of workmanship. I think in terms of material, also different continents have different material sourcing and the local craftsmanship. And I think those will become a lot more important and interesting to people. when we talk about sustainability, talk about well-design, a lot of it has to do with sourcing material locally, reducing carbon footprint, and also design in a more kind of passive energy consumption. So a lot of it has to do with how we design the architecture to minimize the use of artificial ventilation. I think historically, I mean, when you look at some of our design materials, it's like with bamboo, with, you know, very sustainable material. I think the whole idea of building, you know, also Asian design tend to be more horizontal, and I think it's kind of more earth-friendly in a way. So I think the idea of sustainable design has always been part of Asian culture. And also I think the fact that we tend not to be a disposable culture. We tend to reuse things. You know, things are passed down from generation to generation. I think that is also a very strong part of the sustainable concept. I always feel that architects and designers, interior designers, spatial designers, do have a responsibility to our society. What we design can have either a positive or negative impact to the user. I think when we do something that is environmentally sustainable, it is a big responsibility to our future generation. As I start to do projects now, I actually want to convince my client to use more sustainable material, to use more earth-friendly material. And I think in the long run, I find that more and more clients are willing to accept that. There are ways that we can express a certain quality without using kind of like excavated materials. And I think that that would be a good way for young designers to look at our future and to really appreciate the environment and help preserve it.
Thank you. And we're done. I think we've learned everything. We've had it easy. I think we've got everything covered. No. You're going to get more. We're definitely going to unpack their brains today now that we have the two wonderful men on stage. If William, through the video, has shown us what it is like to be the modern-day Renaissance man, from artist to architect to collector, I think what Stanley embodies instead is the reinvention of yourself in parallel form. So quite simply put, you have Stanley, then you have another mountain man. You've had a show before at the Heritage Museum where it was a two-man show, but really it was you, the same guy. So Stanley, I really see yourself as kind of a reinventor through your different modes of inspiration. And I think given that, William, we've seen kind of a glimpse into your world and your space, perhaps, Stanley, we can unpack your brain a little bit and get some of your visuals of your work before we go into the conversation.
Okay. William celebrated his 30 years. Actually, I'm 40 years in the industry. Different practice, commercially, commission work, and also my personal work. Just to like quickly go through back from day one. I start 1980, which I'm 20 years old. So I started as a graphic designer. So graphic design and advertising basically came from the West. Then you can tell we all go for West. We just follow the trend, go West. That's how we start. Also, because it's the 80s and 90s, that kind of whole creative environment, visual communication and design, just like the way I do for Wong Kar-wai's movie, another Wong Kar-wai movie. All visual is Western language. For Tony Leung did album singing those collages from that period. It's all West. But having said that, and 10 years later, then I start become working on local corporate like MTL. So because my target audience is all public, everyone in Hong Kong, so I got to have a kind of local common language to communicate. So you can see using word puzzle, the red lights that is above the ground that we take MTL, then we don't need to be have problem on this. And you can see we also using Chinese obituary that to talk about the tree is dying, the ozone layer is dying, then the environmental friendly kind of messages. Even we do using the burning funeral paper to talk about those Chinese tradition for the cultural event, even putting a shopping bag, kind of supermarket bag for the art auction. So these are all local things that I'm very into for the second 10 years. Of course, that's the red label you mentioned, this very local material symbolizing the positive Hong Kong. I continuously working on this for more than 20 years. Like lately, I did a carpet along this pattern, then symbolizing that Hong Kong walks on, also in conjunction with the situation of nowadays Hong Kong. So 20 years later, then I start to work with the China brand, which is a clothing brand called, say, Exception. They are very local. They are not go trendy and West, Asian aesthetic. So when I work with the China market cultural brand, then I realize I'm being Chinese. So I'm more into humanistic kind of approach, social value, environmental concern. Even I did an interior design for them all with the used object, all recycled materials. Also, sometimes go beyond for the Chinese philosophy, like with Joy Dong Ha, for that sometimes is live now. That, also, I make a T-shirt, future and past. The now is my body and mind. So this is also along, because for China big market, also you using Chinese elements, Chinese belief that it's easy to convey my message. Of course, Chinese aesthetic. Then another 10 years. For last 10 years, there's another project that is, I should mention that because it's very latest for Palace Museum. I worked with them for one gallery, Gallery 5, along the Chinese art and craft, but I got to put it in more nowadays language, how it carry on to today. So you see the aesthetic materials to more contemporize the ancient stories. Of course, we also bring to nowadays how the local designers, masters, how we see, we treasure the Chinese kind of values. So as I said, last 10 years, some designers in Asia that one particular good friend, Muji, creative director, Kenya Hara, and also another guy, he's a master graphic designer, also educator, called Aung San Suu from Korea. Few of us, when we seeing each other, we keep coming to a discussion topic, how a union of Asian people look at ourselves and facing the world. So we keep talking about that. At the end, we really button down, this is Kenya Hara and Aung San Suu. In 2019, we finally pulled together all the graphic designers from Asia and also with the student next generation. We start the first chapter. We meet each other and really holding a kind of a first dialogue, how all Asian within look at ourselves and yet how we bring to the world. So I think that's a very, very beginning stage how Asianness should be an infinite possibility and go beyond. So we talk about our similarity, our differences in terms of culture, history, even to philosophy, and also maybe religious. We do have kind of common things to to discuss and beyond. So I think three of us very optimistic, but too bad, of course, the COVID stopped us with we can't have the second chapter. But having said that, I quickly just run through my 40 years, that different stages that we, or I and myself, then to see design and creativity, how I, as an individual, as a group of people that will bring further, have a output, or and yet the uniqueness to engage the world. I mean, that's how I see. That's what when William mentioned about his book title, "Is Miss Is." So I immediately say, William, can I join the party and involve the board? So that's why the biggest background is like that. So I really into William's kind of same philosophy and thinking. So thank you.
Super. Thank you so much. And I hope the second chapter will happen soon, now that we're semi-COVID free to travel and go around. So thank you so much. I think both of you have had fantastic journeys in both in your kind of personal careers, as well as the people you've inspired, but also kind of been inspired by. And I think kind of that when we talk about reimagining Asian design, let's kind of unpack some of the topics that you've already covered. And maybe we can start with material, since we talked about kind of the aesthetics. Both of you have, you know, through in different ways, have incorporated materials that are uniquely Asian, even Chinese. Kind of immediately brings to mind, of course, is William's use of bamboo. I think Stanley, with, you know, some of the images or some of the content you use, whether it's huge, luscious forests in China or some of kind of the wood that you use. How deliberate is your choice of materials to inform the audience of Asian design? Does the material inspire the work, or does it come only after the idea and form is set? And perhaps maybe William can begin first.
Right. Actually, I think in terms of choice of material, it's becoming very important nowadays, especially when we talk about the world of sustainability, which is, I feel very strongly about this. And definitely, I mean, one of the principles is to source material that are local, that are, you know, you kind of reduce carbon footprint. So I think naturally in Asia, you know, in my project, I would use a lot of materials that are very native to the place. But I'm not, I think also, you know, if we were talking about something like bamboo, actually where we are now at M+, there are a lot of materials using bamboo, a lot of finishes. So I think it's a good example of a material that is kind of thousands of years old. People, I always refer to those bamboo huts that the scholars in Song Dynasty would use. And it's still relevant to now. I think like in Hong Kong, we use a lot of bamboo scaffolding. So it's a material that is relevant to current necessity, which I think is really what I think about this whole idea of East, designing in the East, responding to Eastern needs and Eastern kind of criteria. And I think the use of bamboo is one very relevant aspect of that.
Right. And Stanley?
Oh, yes. I think material to me is a device or the tool that carry the familiarity. Because I'm doing communication, it could be we use something that we're familiar, then we can easily start a dialogue. And at the same time, it's the relevancy. I think, for example, the buying things is the supermarket bag, and then sometimes talk about heaven and hell, then are using burning funeral paper, like the red, white, blue thing. It's part of our construction site, our part of daily life. Then there's a very we have strong empathy or the kind of emotion behind it. So when I started using it for making my voice, putting up a story, it's much easier to get the dialogue going. So I think the local material or that is, to me, is very fundamental good tactics.
Definitely. And I think when we think about familiarity and relevance, I mean, your red, white, blue series is definitely kind of in that category. English, it's so hard for me to translate, but in Cantonese, for those who know, it's Hong Ba Lam. Everybody kind of knows Hong Ba Lam Gao Doi, that kind of common everyday objects that you have somehow been able to elevate into kind of the art kind of area.
Let me go back a little bit then. Yes, we all using Hong Ba Lam, the bag and the scaffolding or the construction side, outside the store, right? I still remember when the very beginning, I started using this material to do two-dimensional thing and then talk about positive Hong Kong. And some people said, Stanley, don't touch this. It's too cheap. It won't go international. It's too local, Stanley. Then I didn't really listen, honest, and because my story is talking about the local, everyone in Hong Kong, I'm not necessary to go international from this. But somehow, years after years, then my project grows international. And this is very, very, very funny part that when local people think this is too expected, they take it for granted. And yet that's the beauty of it is somehow this is a good thing that to share with the outsider, maybe from the East country or even to the West, that they will appreciate something unique from your side that they may not understand.
What year did you start using Hong Ba Lam?
It's a
What
cultural.
year?
2001.
Okay.
Yeah.
So actually, 2006, I brought this bamboo scaffolding to Venice for the Venice Biennale, and it's the same thing. It's like, why would you bring something so local, right, to show in the West? And then, but
when they're there,
But they really appreciate, right? Yeah.
People were fascinated because it's just a totally different technique that they haven't been exposed to, and I think this is really. I think to use your own culture is almost like you have to be not ashamed of it, and then you really then embrace it, and then it becomes something very special.
Totally.
Totally. And I think kind of definitely if we refer back to the book, it's not just a celebration of your hard work, but also that aspiration to continue to bring kind of your culture and to create East for the East, inspired by the East. And you mentioned a little bit about that Asian identity and how you have a philosophy that drives behind. So maybe you can share a little bit to the audience, kind of what is that philosophy, or is there kind of some core elements that drive your Asian identity?
Right. Actually, when I was in university, I started studying American architects, and one of my favorite is Frank Lloyd Wright. And then as I looked more into his influence and what influenced him, and he actually got a lot of influence from Asian architecture, from Japan. And this is why his buildings are very kind of broad, and the roofs are hanging and spreading out, and it's really hugging the earth. So I think there are these kind of principle that has to deal with maybe more of human nature or an Asian type of belief that we are ultimately going back to the ground. And I think, and a lot of superstition, a lot of things that deals with feng shui, which a lot of people think, oh, it's superstition, but in a way, it actually is science, it's statistics, it's psychology, it's how you feel comfortable when you sit somewhere when there's not a road hitting at your face. And a lot of it is psychology. And I think somehow when I design in Asia, for Asian client, for Chinese client, in Thailand, we do a lot of Thai Chinese client. They all have this kind of belief. And that's why I think that it is important when I design here that I do think more about this kind of, in a way, the invisible but psychological and some kind of beliefs that are very important to our culture.
Can I add a little bit? Since he mentioned about architect got influence from Asia, that in the book, very end part, that I wrote a paragraph to sum up the way I experience Asian spirit. Actually, besides architect, he mentioned, actually in 2009, I was in New York Guggenheim, saw an exhibition. The title of the exhibition is The Third Mind, American Artists Contemplate Asia. So it's a big group show involving Bill Viola, John Cage, Robert Washington. They choose these important American modern artists. Most of them, quite a lot of them, they got inspiration from Asia. They came to India, Japan, China. They live here, learn things, and then become the whole big movement about American art. So you see, we do have our very strong access about our culture and history, that even philosophy, that can change people.
Yes. And I think there is some cyclical, there is kind of a cyclical narrative as well, even though, both of you are so incredibly passionate about Asian design. Of course, we can't forego all the experience and all the kind of exposure that you've had through your own kind of career and your development as well. And when we talk about iconic Asian design, I think some great examples that came out from the book when I was flipping through was, of course, the Marina Bay Sands rooftop in Singapore. You kind of renovating the Yonggi here in Hong Kong. And so many of that is, I would say, very iconic. And does Asian designer, for you to kind of want to create icons here in Asia, do you think it necessitates having that Asian outlook, or is it really kind of the embodiment of the philosophy instead?
Yeah, well, actually, when we talk about Marina Bay Sands, it's designed by Moshe Safdie, a U.S.-based architect. But since he practiced in Asia, and he really, I think, when he designed it, he has a really Asian mindset. And in terms of the investment in it, I think at that time it was groundbreaking. It was unbelievable, and it really reflects the kind of wealth that was in Asia. And I think the idea that that bridge that linked the three buildings on the sky, I think it didn't start as an Asian concept, but I think it ends as a very Asian thing. And then after that, he invited me to also design the Chongqing, the Raffles City, which were like 8 towers linked by the sky bridge. These are these extravagant concepts that probably it would become very relevant to the density of an Asian city. So again, back to my idea of East meets East. It doesn't have to be like produced by Asian, but it's like when we practice in a continent, we will have to think more of that continent when we design. Right.
Stanley, and I'm sure you'll agree, also kind of in your recent projects or your creations, do you also have that kind of heavily in your mind? Like you mentioned, you were inspired by the Guggenheim and the American group show looking at Asia. How much kind of do you look outwards, or kind of is it kind of insular and looking at kind of Asian, or do you really kind of absorb all different cultures and identify certain aspects of it in your work?
I think lately, I quickly mentioned the Palace Museum. That show is very significant because my task, my assignment is how to bring the very ancient Chinese historical art and craft and tell a story which is audience walk in is relevant to them. So this is such a meaningful task, I would say. But of course, when we if not bringing the relevancy, we say, okay, it's old days. There's not the product or the objects is not very. I'm not using these objects anymore. Or what should I appreciate to look into this exhibition or gallery? So I think when we presenting it with nowadays Hong Kong artisan, For those making glass, wood crafting, they still working in Hong Kong. Also, maybe the other four designers, they very disciplined or stick to Chinese and Asian kind of design aesthetic and belief. So I think that will be, you see, all from 1,000 years ago to Qing Dynasty, and yet now Hong Kong Chinese, still some people along the way and still doing it in the context now and time. Then so that is making audience or public that into how we appreciate. If not, you're not creative, then. So I think that's also interesting for me.
Yes. I love how both of you have emphasized tradition as well. And I think the lineage of culture and tradition does inform a lot of your works and your creation. But during this panel, I think the last session was on artificial intelligence. We talked about the metaverse. So of course, kind of in today's day and age, melding that kind of tradition with creativity and innovation and technology. How do kind of all these different modes, or how do they balance out when you think about future projects here in Asia, or future kind of works here in Asia?
I think definitely. I think the whole world is thinking about post-pandemic. I think it's going to be a very different world. For architects, our role is very different. I think we have to think design for health in mind, and definitely for the environment. So I think those issues are becoming even more relevant in a post-pandemic world. And I think this is probably what I always believe, that architects has a mission, and we really, because we are building the world in a way, so what we do is a direct reflection. So I think definitely be very environmentally conscious, no matter where you are. But I think it's also a very Asian thing, like I was talking about, that we are not a throwaway culture, so we use a lot of things. Right now, as I speak, we're doing a few projects, one in Thailand, two in Hong Kong, one in Shanghai. They are all revitalization of old structure. I think that's even more important going to the future. Also, all these projects, kind of coincidentally, they all has to do with opening up glass curtain walls, opening up the floor plate, let in natural ventilation, let in nature. And I think, to me, that's what I would be doing in the future. That's very important.
Fantastic. Okay. How about you, Stanley?
Okay, I'm really into technology and virtual world. I embrace and welcome. To me, that's very fast, unpredictable exploring. That's a very exciting part. But somehow I would say, all based on our past, slow down, looking back. That is how all the history, inspiration to support and backing up that how we go further. If you don't know where you're coming from, you don't know where you stand now, then definitely you don't know where you're going. That's very simple logic to me.
Yes, so definitely. Well, thank you both of you so much for your sharing. I think we covered quite a lot of ground on sustainability, on kind of design, Asianness, and I think one of the central messages that I got from both of you is not just your passion, but also that passionate kind of confidence as well as determination to continue tradition, whether or not it's through technology, whether it's through building projects all over Asia. And we very much look forward to some of the new projects that will be coming up. And for those who haven't been to the Palace Museum, I think this is a great opportunity to see how Stanley has allowed us to look at the past with a future lens. Okay. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This week has been an enlightening experience. It is truly amazing how design can empower change in so many fields and topics. Thanks to so many incredible innovators and pioneers who were gracious enough to share their insight and create meaningful dialogues in this year's summit.
So since its establishment in 2002, it is clear that the Business of Design Week is still the leading event in innovation, design, and brand. And certainly, this year's summit has proved that.
And we'll end our summit on this note. If you want to learn more about BODW, make sure to check out the website 2022.bodw.com.
Thank you and see you all next year.
See you!
我個牌子叫 Christian Stone， 電玩遊戲同現實世界嘅一個連接點。
咁呢個咪就係一個 base 喺機能同埋 urban city 嘅男裝。
做呢個 business 嘅時候，都係想靠住我嘅 experience 同埋我嘅 creativity 可以做到一啲 inspire 到人嘅嘢咯。
逐漸品牌慢慢成熟嘅時候，咁啊產品類型越嚟越多，咁其實而家連女裝都會有嘅。
咁其實 Reimagining 佢意思就係 You make Daddy happy 啦，就係一個令我快樂嘅一個牌子。
我喺2017年嘅時候喺 London 嘅 Central St Martins 畢業，機緣巧合之下，我參加咗一個好大型喺紐約嘅一個時裝比賽，好彩我贏咗，估唔到反應真係非常之好。
冇諗過要停，或者其實有好多位，雖然我話我嘗試去 understand 個 market， 但我 understand 完之後，我估我都從來冇 compromise 過我嘅 creativity 咯。
始終我覺得我自己都係一個喺香港出身嘅一個品牌，咁希望喺香港嘅人都可以更加認識我呢一個男裝品牌。
對於我嚟講，其實係似一個夢工場，即係我哋用呢個嘢嚟發夢咁去做一啲我哋想做嘅嘢。咁其實我哋都想跨多啲唔同嘅界別去體驗時裝，咁同埋我哋主要都係想 shout out 翻我哋香港呢個地方個文化真係好正。
之後你會 keep 住想做一啲創新嘅嘢啦 ，3D 啊或者 animation 啊、Unreal Engine 呢啲咁嘅技術上去做一啲 campaign 或者 presentation 嘅，幫個品牌去用多方面嘅呈現出嚟咯。
到你真係切切實實要做個 brand 嘅時候，你有一啲問題遇到嘅時候，唔係好知有啲咩方法解決。我哋自己一個人係做唔到，要 turn to be 一個 business woman，rather than 我淨係純粹提供創意咯。
當你真係去營運一個品牌嘅時候，你會發現其實除咗 design 之外，其實你有一半時間你都要去諗點樣經營一個品牌啦，你點樣去做 promo 去做宣傳 marketing。
開頭我哋唔知點樣可以生產我哋嘅衣服啦，即係冇咁多廠房嘅 support。
難免有時會覺得孤單。當時啱啱開始嘅時候，而一個咁新嘅 designer， 好難話就咁就識到一啲幫到自己嘅人，所以當時一開始嘅時候非常之困難。
其實有好多嘅不足啦，係以前工作上面經驗係冇任何嘅 experience 嘅。喺 FIP 呢個 program 對於點樣營運呢個真正嘅品牌係有一定嘅幫助喺度。
因為 FIP 係更加 fashion focus 嘅一個 program， 咁入面嘅 mentor 喺行業入面做咗好耐，亦都好有經驗。
有好多 support 或者 existing 嘅 resources 可以幫我哋 push 到個 brand 去俾多啲嘅 audience 啦。
我覺得 FIP 可以 provide 到嘅係一個有唔同嘅一啲 promote 嘅機會啦，即係可能我可以同唔同嘅雜誌啊、artist 啊去合作啦。咁其實變相嚟講，對於一個即係新成立嘅品牌嚟講，會係一個好好嘅扶持，令到更加多人會睇到哦呢個品牌原來存在嘅。
我揾到個平衡，點樣去平均分佈？我要設計專貨表演嚟用嘅，有咩設計真係用嚟嘅着？
就真係做到 Made in Hong Kong 啦，希望可以帶俾大家更加多嘅一啲工藝嘅體驗。
existing market 可能冇嘅，或者係唔容易賣嘅，但係我都好堅持係可以 sell 到佢 work 嘅。
着過 design 嘅人話翻俾我知，佢哋好中意着我嘅 design， 呢一點係令我有最大鼓舞嘅地方。
Where fashion finds its leading edge。